16 years ago, Grand Moff Tarkin killed 500 peaceful, unarmed Gormans in the middle of that plaza.
There was a promise that the new Imperial building would never cast a shadow across the memorial.
Tell me about the Gorman front.
They started too late. Now they're rushing.
It's hard to be patient when your world is falling apart.
This is a boot to the throats of all Gormans, who've done nothing more than request their basic rights.
Gorman is a single product economy. We import almost everything we need to survive. The blockade didn't have to go very long to remind us how vulnerable we are.
The only story that matters is Gorman aggression.
The inexplicable resistance to
imperial norms, many people...
All the propaganda. What's the obsession with the Gorman? What are they after? Smear campaign is an opening move, not an end game. I need the end game.
We've promised delivery in 3 years. That delivery is dependent on some version of Gorman calcite.
The extent of our withdrawal may render the planet unstable.
La pénage qu'une porte, la pénage tordée, la garde sous viscagré.
Gorman is neither obscure nor without political power. They will not go quiet.
Think about a planet like Gorman in rebellion. A planet of wealth and status.
Nash konverstand so reftinet.
Nash bi so reft, la nash bi gastam.
If it goes up in flames,
it will burn very brightly.
Proceed.
Palmer 1. This is Palmer 1, making an emergency broadcast on all open channels. We are under siege. We're being slaughtered. The Imperial murder of Gorman has begun.
As the Imperial martyrs of Gorman are mourned, questions are being asked about how an insurrection of this...
The distance between what is said
and what is known to be true...
Hundreds of murdered Gorman lay dead in Palmo Plaza.
...has become an abyss.
Thousands more on the streets, more every minute. We're being destroyed.
Of all the things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous.
That is the real trick of the Imperial thought machine. The pace of oppression outstrips our ability to understand it.
the death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil.
This is Gorman reaching for any open channel that can hear me.
Nobody's listening.
If you can hear me.
Nobody's listening!
No one outside here knows what's happening.
If you believe in truth.
People have to know about this.
If you have any faith left in truth.
Tell people what happened here, Cass.
Please mark this message and pass it forward. The Empire built this fire and led us to the slaughter.
When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands,
we become vulnerable to the appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest.
Now they expect us to die without knowing why. Imperial ships are already landing. This is murder!
This chamber's hold on the truth was finally lost on the Gorman Plaza.
It's easier to hide behind 40 atrocities than a single incident.
Help us! Is there no one who can help us?
Remember this day. Remember Gorman. It's my people today and yours tomorrow.
What took place yesterday was unprovoked genocide. Genocide. And that truth has been exiled from this chamber.
Shut it down.
And the monster screaming the loudest, the monster we've helped create, the monster who will come for us all soon enough, is Emperor Palpatine.
Hey folks, kind of odd, I know, to start the show with a long 5-minute piece from Andor, but there are moments where art intersects with life. And there are moments when you see something like that where the writing and the production is so reminiscent of the moment we're in and so relevant to the moment we're in that when we saw that, and the creator of that did an amazing job, it really moved all of us. And we were thinking about it today. Like, this is a long way to open the show, especially because this is an open show tonight, folks. We're not behind the paywall tonight. So thank you all for joining us. If you haven't been with us before, we sure appreciate you coming in tonight. I'm with Miles Taylor, my friend and a colleague in this fight. And I want to say one more thing about that clip. There are moments in our history where it's easier to see a story placed in some science fiction universe or some spy movie or something where, we say to yourself, that's not exactly us. Where it's easier to get those lessons. And that's one of them. And I think Andor in particular is some of the best writing on television right now about our moment. And that was about our moment. So joined by Miles tonight. Miles, thank you, brother, for coming on. And I want to jump right in to the moment we're in, because a lot of this, the things that you predicted in your book and from your experience are coming to pass now very quickly. They're coming to pass now with amazing speed. And you had a piece and you talked about the Republicans in MAGA love to talk about false flags. They love to talk about fake attacks and all that stuff. But right now, we're seeing the essential equivalent of false flags in our cities. Talk to us a little bit about that. Let's get started with the show.
Well, Rick, it's great to be with you as always, my friend. I appreciate you having me and being in this fight with me. And look, the reason I wanted to mention false flags, you allude to it. That term is a term that the right has used to justify all sorts of conspiracy theories. I mean, look back to things like Sandy Hook and all the far right commentators that were rightfully repudiated up to and including sued out of existence almost because of claiming that it was a false flag operation to engage in policy, tinkering by the Democrats on gun control. All false, all conspiracy theories. You cannot overstate the irony that now the first actual false flag operation of some significance we have seen in our public life is being perpetrated by MAGA right now. And that is this effort to deploy troops into American cities, which I will say firsthand from my time in the Trump administration is a type of activity meant to provoke violence in this country, meant to create the thing it is purporting to go fight. There is not a domestic terrorist crisis from the left right now in this country. There are not Antifa armed terrorists like bin Laden's lieutenants, plotting to hijack airplanes and trying to blow up dirty bombs in the subways. It doesn't exist.
No.
But their hope is that by doing something so provocative, like sending troops into American cities, making people feel like they are under the jackboot of authoritarianism, that they will provoke some level of violence. And authoritarians have rightfully bet throughout history that that's the case, that if they crack down on the people will resist. 99% will be peaceful. 1% will say, we've had enough of this shit. They'll engage in violence, and that violence will be made to look like it was perpetrated by the 99% that were peaceful to justify further crackdowns. This is what the administration is carrying out right now. And you can tell, Rick, that they were disappointed that it didn't happen in Los Angeles. They thought Los Angeles would be a hotbed of protest activity that would turn violent. It didn't. The people were peaceful. They thought it would happen in Washington, D.C. Now they are hoping that it happens somewhere like Portland, where it happened before. In 2020, they were using that imagery in the hopes that if Trump won a second term, they could do what they are doing now, is announce a domestic terrorism campaign against the political opposition. But of course, Trump didn't win re-election. And so now they're going back to Portland, back to the well, if you will, hoping that they can create those facts and circumstances to justify a wider crackdown.
Yeah, I want to talk about Portland for a second, because it is a place where they thought there would be a repeat of 20. where, and folks, just so folks are aware, about 99% of what you think of as Antifa in Portland are a group, and I kid you not, it's about 60 kids called the Black Bloc, and there are various teenagers that float in and out of this thing. They are not an organized terror movement. They are teenage assholes. And Trump is hoping to convince people, he says it every day, Portland is burning, Portland is on fire. I mean, Miles, you know from the last time around, they kept their cameras from Fox and the streamers that were covering it on the right. They kept their cameras in a very tight focus because they don't want to show you that the rest of Portland is a perfectly livable, peaceful, wonderful city. They want to try to convince you that a half a block in front of the ICE headquarters is a war zone, and that it is desperate, ICE agents surrounded by armed terrorists under attack, like it's something in the middle of the Iraqi desert when they're pinned down. It is a lie wrapped in a lie.
It absolutely is, and it's why, Rick, I think it's been so notable that federal officials, state officials, and local officials have been trying to document that as much as possible. And I think that's as good of pushback as you could possibly mount. I mean, it's one thing for you and I to hop on a news program and say it's not that bad. It's a totally different thing to just have Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon live stream and walk up to the ICE facility, and it's a sunny day and the birds are chirping and the grass is blowing in the breeze and there's no one around. It's just quiet. That contrast is what is needed to embarrass this president and to deprive him of the narrative that only the United States military can go in and solve these problems. And, I think for most people, that reality should be made clear by the fact that you would never need to deploy U.S. troops to go solve petty crime and, theft on the subway system. You would just add more police. You would engage in community policing. But for the folks who don't understand that, for the folks who are susceptible to the MAGA narrative that we've got to be tough and send in the troops, we need to show them this is ridiculous. This is false. Like you said, this is a lie wrapped in a lie. And as much as Benny Johnson and conservative podcasters are trying to create this other narrative, the counter narrative is just as important right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's happened in Portland, and I don't know, I don't keep track of these guys day to day, but those Black Bloc kids who made up what was called Antifa in 2020, they do not seem to be showing up. But instead, you've got people like dressed up as Victorian schoolmarms, and you've got people dressed as dinosaurs and wizards, and they've almost added this sort of like goofy Portlandic edge to the protest there that I think makes it much harder for Nick Sorter and Benny and those others to go out and breathlessly like, poor ICE is under attack again. Somebody dressed as a dinosaur. It doesn't exactly have the same sort of intimidating aspect.
I'm so glad that you say that because I'm terrible at comedy. I'm not that funny. And after all of this junk the past few years, it makes you so self-serious that you wish you'd been hiding under a rock so you could pop out and make fun of it. But the folks who are able to harness humor in this moment, I think, are vastly more powerful than you or I, Rick, or anyone else in this mix, because the aggressors here, like in any situation where you have an aggressor, they won't budge with criticism. But when people are pointing at them and laughing, they get nervous, they trip up. It really, really is the type of thing that spreads. I mean, I always say, if you're making a speech and you make a really strong and powerful point, you might get people to clap. But if you make a really good joke, they laugh and they retell it. It's infectious. It spreads. It's great communication. And I think that's one of the things that may backfire on them in going so aggressively after Portland, probably the weirdest city in the United States.
By a good stretch.
Well, if you've never been to Portland, just trust Rick and I on this. It's really, they take pride in how bizarre they are. And if that can be transmuted to other cities,
right,
it could be very effective. I mean, I note the other day, Rick, I saw an announcement that Portlanders are also planning a naked bike ride in protest. And there is set to be, in the next couple of weeks, a massive nude bike ride through the city and by these, troops and by the ICE station. And I mean, how could you more effectively show that this is not a place under siege? It's not like we saw videos in Baghdad of people
right.
doing naked bike rides,
Yeah,
day
no,
and night,
no.
or in Afghanistan.
I do not recall any naked bike rides during the whole
That's
Baghdad
right.
situation.
This is the type of thing that will neuter the administration's argument. Maybe neuter is the wrong word there if we're talking about a naked bike ride. But anyway, the point being, these are the types of things we need to see, and which I think are effective.
I think that's exactly right. And it's funny because I was writing a piece today about Bondi's ridiculous appearance before the Judiciary Committee today. And my first draft of it was very like, how dare she? And then I just rewrote it and I was like, fuck this. I'm just going to make fun of her because it's so over. They want you to go, how dare you? How dare you? I'm so offended by your shamelessness. Now it's just like if you mock them, as you correctly point out, it is their kryptonite. It's their soft underbelly. They cannot abide being treated as unserious. Evil people can still be unserious, and these are unserious people at a lot of levels. On a serious note, though, it started with you and with Chris Krebs a few months ago, where the administration announced they were going to investigate you because you're on Trump's enemies list. And in the last week or so, we've now seen Jim Comey brought up to an indictment brought by this clown show, Lindsay Halligan, this temporary, maybe not legal U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. And Trump is beating on people, including Pam Bondi, to do more, to go after more people. What is your take? Well, first off, tell us where your situation is right now. What's your status on the targeting they've done against you? And let's talk a little bit about, like, they've now gone after Comey. I think you're going to see Brennan and a few other folks next. Where do you see the appetite for prosecutions of you and others amongst the line prosecutors in the DOJ and amongst the White House? I know there's a divergence there.
A divergence would be an understatement. I think the appetite at the White House is insatiable, and I think line prosecutors, even ones who might have some sympathy for this administration's overall agenda,
right,
do not want these cases. These are career-wrecking cases because they're junk cases. This is what happens when the president starts off and declares his target guilty of something and then says, go find the evidence. Well, if the evidence is not there, they're going to have a lot of trouble. And, in my case, of course, the president accused me of treason. I think, to my knowledge, one of the only crimes envisioned in the Constitution, and a crime that's punishable by death. Here we are, 6 months later, almost to the day. It's really extraordinary, Rick. If I've committed treason against the United States, why on earth am I walking free?
Right?
Why am I on a podcast with you?
Indeed. I mean, if you're on that enemies list, it's such a serious threat to national security. What's up?
Well, it is a charge as serious as murder. If I was accused by the president of the United States of murder, why would they let a murderer walk free for 6 months? If the answer is not obvious to folks, it's that they just haven't been able to find evidence yet that I committed treason. The president
or
put
create
the cart
evidence.
the president put the cart before the horse and said, "Here's the crime. You got to go prove it." Well, that's a pretty damn high bar to go prove. Now, what I do think will happen, whether it's to me or Brennan or Krebs or others, is they're going to find a thing like they did for Comey that is, even under the thinnest veneer of legality, prosecutable, because he wants to see this montage of mugshots of his adversaries. That's what Trump wants more than anything. He cares less about the later part of the process. Are they convicted? How are they sentenced? He wants the thing that humiliated him, which was the picture of himself, his mugshot, surrounded by the mugshots of his lieutenants who were legitimately charged for actual crimes. He wants
who
to
were
create that.
busy criming and got indicted because they were committing federal crimes.
And you see this story being recast in real time. I mean, the pearl clutching incredulousness from Republican senators that they were named in Jack Smith's investigative files is something that, if you scratch under the surface, does not tell the story they want to tell. The only reason, to my knowledge, that any Republican senator was briefly examined by the FBI was because they were engaging with a known criminal, Donald Trump, who's the subject of this investigation, who was making phone calls to Republican senators to execute his plot to frustrate the transfer of power in the United States. Of course, there were Republican
And they were
senators.
also making, and some of them, I have been told, were making calls to other people active in the conspiracy that the president was directing, including people were calling and coordinating things with Steve Bannon. People were coordinating things with Roger Stone. This is not going to end the way they think it's going to end, which is why I think that they will have this as a drama for a day or two and just declare forever now. Comey spied on us for 20 years, and garbage, of course, but the kind of garbage that they certainly, it really showed me today, like the hearing. I'm gonna get your thoughts on this too. The hearing today was one of those great examples of Bondi was there to save her job and to feed the Fox News content machine. A lot of the Republicans were there, like Lindsey Graham, so they could, and Marsha Blackburn, so that today, as both of them did this afternoon, blast out fundraising emails saying, "Oh my God, can you believe, because I love Trump, that Comey spied on me?"
Mm-hmm.
And the Democrats are sort of like, well, wait, what about accountability? What about doing the right? What about the rule of law? And like the two audiences could not be in further separated universes.
I would agree with you on that. One thing on the Attorney General's performance that I would point out, this goes back to our conversation about comedy. She tried to make some dark jokes at the expense of Democratic senators. I saw some folks out there saying, "Oh, wow, she came prepared to turn this hearing against them." Jokes don't work if you can see the person reading the joke off the piece of paper.
Correct.
And throughout this hearing, the Attorney General was trying to surreptitiously move through her papers and find the notes that she had written or her staff had written about,
or ChatGPT had written.
Yeah, that's right, about jabs to make about each of these senators. And you could see her looking down at the notes and reading those. So far from a good performance, I think it was an incredibly poor performance. I would give a play 1 star out of 5 or 0 stars out of 5 if I saw someone show up with the script on stage.
It's regional dinner theater. It is not. It was not an impressive display of either her mental facility to be funny or look, a lot of that, like it was very theatrical, very sweaty, sort of like scenery chewing bullshit. But it is truly, I think, a sign of the different cultures in the Senate, and they would the ones who weren't trying to chew the scenery, Lindsey Graham and etc., were trying to give her outs to talk about fentanyl and immigration and stuff. And it just, I mean, you could see that she was so prepped to do the little stunt that everything else came across as very flat.
Absolutely. And that shows where her focus is. And I think you're right, Rick. On the back end of all of this, when accountability returns, the Attorney General will have the opportunity probably to be a bit player in a regional dinner theater at best professionally, because she most likely will not have a law license when this is all over. But that being said, I would agree with you that her performance showed that she is not focused on the substance of the job. She is focused on an audience of one. And I remember the cabinet secretaries who did this in the first Trump administration, and there were far fewer of them. But now they all have to be obsequious pleasers in order to remain. But the ones who did that in hearing prep did exactly what you saw Bondi do today. They thought about barbs that they could trade with senators. They thought about the things they could say because the president would see it replayed on Fox, and they knew that their jobs were dependent on that. That's not made up. They saw their colleagues getting fired by tweet for saying the wrong thing. And this cast of characters in the second Trump administration, that is their whole focus. How do I perform for the boss, not just in front of the cameras, but behind the cameras, by bringing things like false charges against a Jim Comey so that they can remain in their jobs? And, at some point you have to ask the question, how important is that job to you? How far will you go? And I think, unfortunately, we know the answer.
I know the
There's no
answer for
limit.
Pam. I've known Pam for 25 years. The answer is all the way down. She will not. One thing about Pam Bondi, she is not a particularly bright person, but she is an obedient person, and that for Trump is something that she and her sponsors, her patrons in the lobbying firm she used to work for, they want her there as long as humanly possible. And they're promising her already, I'm sure, oh, don't worry, we'll cover any legal fees down the line when the Democrats take power again. Don't worry, Pam. Although I did think today, the thing that she really screwed the pooch on today, and I think is going to get her in trouble with Trump, is just holding the line on the Epstein files about the cover-up that she runs is not sufficient. When Sheldon Whitehouse asked her, have you found the pictures that Epstein and claimed to have of Trump with little girls? She had a smart comeback, but there was a beat. Let's play that clip. There was a beat where she did not like it at all.
Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
There was a beat there before she looked down, as you noted, and to her notebook, and immediately started launching an attack on White House. I mean, if she was going to make Trump happy, she should have said, no such pictures ever existed, and we know that to be true, sir. But she couldn't and didn't, which makes me feel like a lot of this theatricality was to not answer Epstein questions. And that was one she could have helped him on. And there were others as well today. She could have helped him dig out. She could have said things like, there's nothing we found that implicates the president. And I got a feeling that tonight, when Laura Loomer starts pissing in his ear, that will be part of it.
And if she doesn't, I hope she will tomorrow, because that is very, very telling. What she didn't say is just as telling as what she did say. And I'll tell folks why. It's because right now, Pam Bondi's Justice Department is trying to make a case against a former DOJ official, James Comey, about lying to Congress. She is very, very aware that in the future, because MAGA won't be in power forever, you can bet every single time a Trump official went and testified before Congress, whether it made headline news or whether it was on C-SPAN 9 at 3 in the morning.
Joe, C-SPAN 8.
That's right. It will get reviewed and assessed for actual instances of perjury. And this is one of those where we will be asking years from now, what did Pam Bondi know and when did she know it about one of the biggest cover-ups, if not the biggest cover-up in presidential history? 100%. And this testimony is going to be scrutinized. And I almost think her aversion, like you said, Rick, to even defending the president on those questions is a signal of guilt. It's at least smoke that could lead us to fire.
I think it stinks on ice. There was a lot there today where her big lie about the Epstein stuff is, that's still a legal matter. No, it's not actually, unless they've made it one internally. And I think she lied a lot about almost everything she was questioned about. Lied about the Qatari airplane bribe, lied about Eric Siebert, lied about the National Guard being deployed into our cities. I mean, this almost across the board, her belief that she can say that she can either lie directly or lie by omission I think it is a trap she has put herself in, and as has Kash Patel and a number of these other idiots as we go forward. But I think you're right. There's going to come a day, and look, there was a 5-year statute on Comey that they may have missed by a day, or because of this inappropriate nature of the grand jury hearing. But 5 years is a long time, Pam. So I want to talk about the National Guard thing for 1 minute, Miles, before we wrap up. This is a major expansion of the use of federal power by expanding the presence of National Guard troops in our streets, masked, engaged in direct law enforcement. This is one picture today that was issued. The Texas National Guard is deploying to Chicago. And I would like to send this to Pete Hegseth, because apparently they have deployed MEAL Team 6. I'm sure these are all great guys, hardworking guys, but they are not the image that Pete Hegseth claims that we must have for all of our soldiers in the field. But this expansion of the use of the National Guard folks into American cities, this is to loop back to where we started with the false flag idea. I look at it as an incredible breach of the military's role and institutional position in American society. Talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on this, because this was something they thought about in the first term.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that the president himself raised with us on multiple occasions, and I have one tiny sliver of perspective in the first Trump administration. And so if I am repeatedly hearing about the Insurrection Act from the president, you can bet that it was coming up in a lot more conversations. But let me start off by saying, Rick, this is it. This is the big one. The invocation of the Insurrection Act, unfortunately, is the power that really is tantamount to martial law in the United States. And people should take it very seriously that the governor of the largest state in this country this week tweeted out that we are on the brink of martial law.
Yeah.
That is extraordinary. Whether you agree with Gavin Newsom or not, the fact that the current facts and circumstances on the ground would lead a governor of the biggest state to say that tells us how close we are to the brink. And if we go over it, Rick, and Trump uses the Insurrection Act, I'm telling you, there's almost no limitation to what he can do if the courts don't strike him down. And it's, I think, the only reason he has not invoked it yet is they don't have the imagery to justify claims that there is an insurrection or rebellion in the United States or a foreign invasion. And so they're trying to, by deploying the National Guard instead, gin up enough opposition to tell that story, because there are conservative judges that are going to say, look, in times of national crisis, we are going to defer to the chief executive about what does or doesn't qualify as insurrection. The courts have often done that throughout history, and they are only going to strike down his ability to invoke the Insurrection Act if it is so completely manifestly obvious that the circumstances don't meet that moment. And so they want to build the fact pattern that allows them to say that. They want to instigate violence. But if he does invoke this, I mean, what I have a hard time conveying to folks is how pervasive it could become. And there's a huge spectrum here. Like folks have said, we could look like Hungary or we could look like Russia. But Donald Trump, if he can send the United States military into any city and control civilian law enforcement, that means if your bakery is out of compliance on a regulation that's a local regulation, Donald Trump can send a United States Marine in there and lord that over them and threaten him. And there's nothing he wants more than the ability, anywhere he sees a problem, to create leverage over the person he sees as a problem, whether it's a governor or a small business owner or a school teacher or a teachers union, you name it. He wants the ability to send soldiers to your house to say, don't do this thing that I want you to do. The Insurrection Act gives him that ability, hypothetically. Now, I don't know if we end up in that universe, but the fact that it opens the door to it is what really should terrify people.
I think that's exactly right, Miles. And folks, what you should understand is he's using the National Guard now because there is slightly different legal status from deploying active duty and reserve troops. And if he does the Insurrection Act and he does this thing like, I'm going to send the 82nd Airborne, which is beyond ludicrous for folks who understand the role of the 82nd as a quick reaction force, and as they are not a law enforcement agency, guys. They are not even a civil affairs agency. They are meant to kill people and break things at scale and do it quickly. So if he does do the Insurrection Act and deploys active duty and reserve forces into our streets, as they touched a little bit in LA, I think we are in a very dark place. I think we're in I mean, that should, for folks who wonder, like, what's the line? That's a pretty red line. That's a pretty dangerous place for us to be.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, can I say that there's some words I want people to remember here, and they are rules of engagement, because we had to have conversations with the President of the United States in his first term where he asked us to shoot civilians who were unarmed. In our case, it was at the border. Later, Mark Esper reported that he did the same thing with protesters, and he had to be retaught what the rules of engagement are. Mr. President, U.S. forces cannot shoot innocent civilians who are unarmed. That is not proportional. That's not compliant with the rules of engagement and the laws of war. I mention that because a week ago, the Secretary of Defense told a group of the highest generals in the military that their shackles would come off, that the rules of engagement were going to be loosened. They didn't talk a whole lot about foreign policy in that address. They didn't talk a whole lot about winning wars abroad. So you need to assume they are talking about loosening the rules of engagement Donald Trump was so frustrated by in his first term, the rules that kept him from sending the military into U.S. city streets to harm unarmed civilians, that he wants to do that again and domestically, and he appears to have a defense secretary who is willing to comply.
And he certainly has Stephen Miller. And I think this is why Miller has been framing all of this as terrorism. All the objections to ICE, peaceful or not, he's framing that as terrorism. And he's using phrases like a terrorist organization, a terrorist movement, a network of terrorist funding. This is, I think, doing a little stage setting for Miller to give Trump and then Hegseth the excuse to say, well, they're terrorists. We have to treat them just like we treated Al-Qaeda or ISIS. We're going to treat them with maximum kinetic impact. And, when Trump said, we're going to go into Portland with full force, those of us who've been around know that full force, what does that mean? Does that mean drone strikes? Are we going to roll armor in the streets? What's that scale mean to Donald Trump? That should concern everybody. And it's a question now, folks, in this country that, I wish Miles and I had some like sunshine and roses to serve up tonight, but this is a serious moment and a dangerous moment for the country. And I mean, the only upside of this is that Trump's numbers are so terrible. He's increasingly unpopular, and the deployment of these troops into the cities is only even at about 50% with MAGA voters. It is, everybody else hates it, including a lot of it, all the independents and all the Democrats and half the Republicans. So there is no political consensus behind Trump doing this. That doesn't necessarily matter to him. And I think, Miles, I want to recommend that folks check out Miles's Substack, treason.substack.com. He does a ton of writing about this moment we're in, the dangers that we're in. He is a guy who's been on the front lines of this. He's right now under the gun legally. Miles, tell folks about how they can support your legal defense fund on Substack and on.
Grateful for that, Rick. Yeah, I mean, look, we've certainly found ourselves in the position of having to defend against the lawlessness. We have a bunch of different legal teams we've had to bring on because of threats to our family, a potential case from the president. And so Whistleblower Aid has set up something called endpresidentialrevenge.org. That's endpresidentialrevenge.org. Doesn't just help us bear the brunt of the legal costs, but also helps other whistleblowers who are in Donald Trump's crosshairs. So incredibly grateful for the support we've had from folks. The only reason we have been able to fight back against this is because our defense has been crowdsourced from around the country by people we've never met. So we're immensely grateful for that.
Well, it's important, folks, and believe me, I've been on the receiving end of MAGA revenge legal porn with Mike Flynn suing me for $10 million. Trump has his lawyers threatening to sue me for $1 billion right now, which, as I like to say, good luck. I don't happen to have a spare billion laying around, but good luck.
All you have to do is get elected president, Rick, and then you can get a $500 million jet from a foreign country. Then you can use $1 billion in taxpayer dollars to retrofit it to your specifications.
Why not? I mean, look, I love my plane, but it only seats 4. I think I need to up the game. Those are amateur numbers. Anyway, Miles Taylor, thank you for joining us as always. We really appreciate you. And folks, thank you for watching tonight on Lincoln Square. Normally this show is behind the paywall. Joe Trippi and Stuart Stevens are both traveling tonight, but I'm delighted to have been joined by Miles. We always try to pull back the curtain on what's happening in politics in this country, give you guys an insight and some perspectives on the fight that we're in, good, bad, and indifferent. And we appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday. And thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.